So before we even go ahead and start using our builders to start scraping, we actually have to have a scraper to scrape with. So let's go ahead and create our scraper. I will go ahead and create another folder called workers. And within that, I will create a new class called scraper. So I will call this scraper. And then I will have a method within it, which is a public method. And that will say it's going to return a list of strings, and the name is going to be scrape. And it's going to take in scrape criteria. So remember scrape criteria, the one we created that has parts and regex and all kinds of good stuff. It is the criteria on how we are going to be scraping the page. I actually don't need these curly braces. And then I'm going to have a string, the list of strings that I'm going to name scraped elements. And essentially, this is going to be the list that will have all the scraped elements. So we can actually go ahead and return. Right now, it's only going to return an empty list. But in the middle of the body, we're going to actually perform the scraping operation, right? So now, what do we need to do? So the scrape criteria, let's step back for a little bit. So scrape criteria basically tells us how to scrape the page. It tells us how granular we want to go within the scraping, right? Because if you actually look at the object, it has the data. The data is the data that we want to scrape. Regex is how we want to scrape it. The option is just specific things about our regex that we will talk about a little later. And it's just options of how our regex needs to behave. And then we have parts. The parts is how granular we want to go into our search. So we said that we want to actually grab an HTML element, and then we want to have an ability to go even deeper within that element. So that's what the parts allow us to do. But now we actually need to do the matching. And remember how we do the matching? Exactly. .NET allows us to basically run regular expressions by giving us a regular expression engine. And the way we access that is by regex. And that's a custom type that we can use. So we say match collection. So match collection. And then we can just name it matches, just like we did in our example, and then say regex dot. So actually, let's import that library so we can start using these, and they're not underlined red. Then regex dot matches. And now here's the interesting part. So first, we have to provide it with the input. So what is the input? The input is data, right? And then we have to provide it with the regex. The regex is the regex. We already have everything on the criteria that we need. And it also has a third option. And this is the option, the regex option that you remember, scrape criteria.regex option, right? So everything is provided. And then this will basically perform the matching operation. And afterwards, once the matching has been done, we can go through the match collection and say, okay, well, now, for each match in matches, right, we say, let's see if we want to add it to the scraped elements. So here's the tricky part, though. We say if the scraped elements dot parts have anything in them, or in this case, we're saying if the scraped elements criteria doesn't have any parts, then just go ahead and add that match to the scraped elements, because there's no granularity level. Like, we just got the element and that's all we need. If it doesn't have any parts, meaning it doesn't need to go any deeper into that element. So just basically grab that and say, okay, well, the match dot groups 0 dot value. This basically means that the first group is going to have our matched element. So it's going to grab that matched element, and the value of that matched element is the actual thing, the actual string that we want to add to our scraped elements. And that's going to be our element without any level of granularity. So if we have a level of granularity, then what we're going to do is we're going to have another loop that's going to go ahead and go through the scrape criteria parts. Oops. Var part in scrape criteria parts. And it's going to go through each and every part, and it's going to do another match. So it's going to say match matched part equals regex that match. And now the input is going to be the match group 0 value, because this is the element, right? And we want to go granular inside of that element. And the part criteria, remember, it does have a regex. And then that also has a regex option, meaning how is the parts regex one needs to behave. So that's what we're specifying here. So it's another matching. And this is what I mean, we need to go even deeper. So basically, once again, if we only have one level, then we're only grabbing the element. However, if that element has any parts that we want to grab, then we're doing another matching. And from that element, right? From that element, we're grabbing certain parts. And now we say, okay, well, once you have done your matching, come down here and say if matched part dot success, meaning that there was a match, then go ahead and say scraped elements dot add, and then you're going to say matched part dot groups 1 value. So this is the second level of the match. If there are any parts within the element, then we're grabbing those and putting those into the scraped element. And after the whole thing is done, we're returning scraped elements back as a list of strings. And that's what's going to come back to the program. And in our next video, we'll be going over how to put it all together so we have our scraper and we can start scraping Craigslist listings.